Oh yes, the sounds of Running Wild with Under the Jolly Roger. Fantastic. Yes, it is pirate metal. If such a thing existed, that would be it. It does exist. It's that. It's fabulous. Right, you're back on Blue Please here on WoW Radio. Some people seem to be confused. They're in the World of Warcraft chat room and complaining about Blue Please or whatever. No, if you want to complain about the show, you need to be in WoW Radio. That's hash WoW Radio for the Europeans, pound WoW Radio for the Americans. To get there, you type /join, hash or pound WoW Radio. That's where you need to be. That's where everyone else is. If you're not there, you're uncool. You're uncool. Really. Anyway, I just posted in the channel, and for the benefit of those not in the channel, and of course in the listening to the archives right now, of how many shout-outs I actually have to do. I posted a screenshot. If you want to see it, go to http://premium1.uploadit.org/totalbiscuit/omfghacks.jpg. That's premium1.uploadit.org/totalbiscuit/omfghacks.jpg. My entire arse here window is absolutely covered in requests for shout-outs, so if I miss your shout-out, that's why. It's being drowned in the ridiculous amount of silliness. Absolute silliness we're getting in here. But it's good fun. Now, I've got to thank Dark Legion, who's just posted the best pick ever. No two ways about it, there is no pick better than this. And if you want to see it, go to www.teamextreme, that's with an X, teamextreme.bluewav.co.uk/nerftb. Total Biscuit is unbalanced and working as intended. Now, a few more shoutouts to get out before I get back to what I was supposed to be doing, which is discussing things that, like, don't suck, you know. So, shout out to all the Horde from Two Beard. He was just ganked in. Oh no, the Horde he ganked in Gadgetan on the EU server Zenadar. Evil ganking evilness. Ugh. Evil gankers of horrible doom. Damn Alliance. Shout out to Night Demons Guild, the Extreme Alliance on Dragon Blight. Bloody too many shout-outs here. It's giving me a headache. Let's see. Shout out to Kurazi, the Elite Sorcerer of Tibia. That's www.tibia.com. I seem to recall that's another game. We can't advertise other games here. We love Blizzard. Or so people tell me. Shout out to Nimbus, the Tally Leader, whoever he may be. Jamie says, Shamans aren't in by you, just suck, sir. Ah ha 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 ha. Sticky out tongue smiley. And apparently GCSE failure Chris needs a fertility blessing. He got kicked in the nuts by Hobag Claire. Ouch. How incredibly unpleasant. Ugh. Okay. Get back to what I'm supposed to be doing, which is a show. Oddly enough, I can't do shout-outs all show, although it would be nice and easy. I want to talk about things that supposedly matter. Now, we were talking earlier about who should have the final word on balancing and who should be listened to when balancing becomes an issue. Is it Blizzard? Is it the community? Is it a little bit of both? Ho-hum, he said. And this has come to the fore in the latest nerf request, and that's to the Blessing of Salvation. Those who do not know, the Blessing of Salvation is a paladin ability. I don't know much about paladins. I don't play Alliance. I have a pal, he's level 9. I don't have Blessing of Salvation. But Tigol, the Blizzard poster, has to be said, my favourite Blizzard poster, seems to come up with a lot of very sensible things. Has the explanation. He says this: Blessing of Salvation is an interesting spell. It's completely and totally meaningless in PvP. It's completely useless for soloing Paladin. It's a minor at best improvement in a 5-man PvE encounter. For a raid encounter where aggro management can determine the outcome of a fight, is an extremely powerful and advantageous spell. So, the Blessing of Salvation, we're looking at a Fade style ability here. I'm just going to look it up just so I know exactly what I'm talking about before I continue. Blessing of Salvation, Thoughtbot, give me my blessing. Places a blessing on the party member, reducing the amount of all threat generated by 30% for 5 minutes. That is awesome. No two ways about it. That is great. Especially for my spam fire mage of doom that always keeps getting the aggro off the goddamn tank. So, it's an aggro reducing ability. Very handy. Very handy indeed in big raid encounters where, as Tigol said, aggro management is the name of the game. So, back to what Tigol was saying. He's saying that this is a major advantage in a raid scenario. Obviously, the one that's causing people the most trouble at the moment is the Blackwing Lair. And what I've heard of Blackwing Lair aggro management is a massive issue. And people wipe constantly because they can't manage all the aggro they're getting. And this isn't just from the bosses, this is the trash mobs we're talking about here. So, Tigol puts it down and breaks it down to the issue quite nicely here and says, the core of the controversy surrounding the spell is, of course, that the Alliance have it and the Horde don't. Oh, noes! This happens so much. And in previous Blue Pleases, I've gone over the concept of balance. And it doesn't matter how hard I try, balance always seems to sprout a new head. Balance is like the Hydra that just won't die. Cut off as many of its heads as possible, new ones will sprout in its place. Balance is an almost impossible concept. But every game's developer must strive to attain it, because the community demands balance. Sometimes it's justified. I will never say that balance is not justified. Absolutely, vitally important. But sometimes people use it as an excuse for their own failings. Perhaps they have not learned how to play their class properly. Perhaps their equipment is not quite as good as someone else's. They cry nerf. Perhaps they've simply not learned how to beat a particular class yet. They cry nerf. And when it comes to something that we have different, for instance, if the Horde has a different class or a different ability, a different item, different quests, it's a nerf from the Alliance. If the Alliance has that, it's a nerf from the Horde. It's nerf ping-pong. Backwards and forwards between the two sides. Nerf this, nerf that, nerf the side that isn't me. So there's a ho-hum here. Blessing of Salvation is the latest target of the nerf bat. And what Tigol says here is very interesting. Very interesting indeed. And I applaud him for saying this. It's about time somebody said this, quite frankly. He wins prizes. Many prizes for this. Let me take a moment to state, this is what he says, that we do not expect all encounters to play the same for Horde and Alliance. In a perfect world, an occasional encounter will be easier or more difficult depending on whether or not you are Horde or Alliance. A good example of this is Magmadar. Some might argue that Magmadar is easier for the Alliance because of Field Ward. Some might argue that it is easier for the Horde because of Will of the Forsaken. At the end of the day, both Horde and Alliance can beat the encounter, and there is not a drastic difference in difficulty. There is a difference, but not a drastic difference. And that reminds me of Warcraft 2, another Blizzard game, as you should well know. The sides were almost identical. Almost. The units themselves were identical. The difference were the micromanageable abilities of casters. And there's where it got interesting. Because people in Warcraft 2, I was playing Warcraft 2 back when it wasn't even Battle.net edition. I used to play it over a null modem cable. I used to do direct dial to another person's machine, as in paying local rates to play a game with someone. An absurd concept these days. Absolutely ridiculous, but we did it. Back in the good old days when entertainment was bland and inoffensive. So, when Battle.net came out, it shocked me to learn that people believed that the game was imbalanced in favour of one or another, because surely both sides are the same. And while the spells and abilities are different, they're simply used in different ways. Before this, I had no concept of balance. I simply thought, well, okay, So, I can't beat that. Let's try something else. If I can't beat A, I will use C to beat A. Then they will use B to beat C. I will use D to beat B, etc., etc. Strategy, counter-strategy, counter. It's the way to go. Always has been. But balance became this issue, and especially as online gaming took off and it became very competitive against player versus player rather than player versus environment. You don't see a lot of balance arguments in purely player versus environment games. It's irrelevant. To a degree. It's certainly an issue, but nowhere near as big an issue as in a player versus player environment, because everyone wants the advantage. Everybody wants to be able to do certain things as well as everybody else. And if they can't, there shall be hell to pay. So, should Blessing of Salvation be nerfed? No, I don't agree. I don't agree with nerfing anything. I agree with simply buffing everything else to its level. Yeah, it's a really complicated thing to do, but nerfing things simply ends up with abilities that are next to pathetic. In a first-person shooter, you wouldn't continually nerf weapons just to try and get them into balance and end up having to fire 300 bullets at someone to kill them. Same principle in MMORPGs. Abilities are interesting because they are powerful. And they should stay that way. That's my view on the whole Blessing of Salvation thing. Right. I haven't got a lot of time left, so I better get on to another one of our features. You know him. You probably don't love him. No, I certainly don't. It's the one and only...
Ask the Murloc.
Well, that should have scared you and woken you up if I'd sent you to sleep with that little rant. It's time for the Ask the Murloc. As the Murloc answers all your unfortunate newbie questions in his own inimitable style. Enjoy.
Ask the Murloc.
Dear Murloc, what is the difference between a PvP server and a PvE server?
It's you again, back for some pearls of astounding wisdom, are we? That'll be 100 gold each, for it is I, the Murloc, ha-ha! Come to take tribute to fruit baskets and tasty puppies for tonight's banquet, yes. Now to the matter at hand, yes, the question. The differences between a PvP and a PvE server are obvious to even a brain-dead imbecile like yourself, who's clearly not read the freaking manual. Player versus player is filled with witless, gibbering morons known as PvPers. They whittle away their ultimately pointless little lives, blithering about how they pawns are. All 10 noobs with their Uber kit and attempting to initiate courtship with any female avatar in sight. PvE servers are reasonably similar to this. However, they are filled with so-called Care Bears who spend all day hugging and cleaning up after each other. Their pastimes include flower arranging and maypole dancing. There's also a third kind of server called RP, or Role Play, where they send the players to and stable to play with the rest of us. I've heard they dress up as animals and talk in ye olde English. Fools! Ha ha!
Ask the Murloc.
Dear Murloc, I bought a cat as a pet. Can I name it? Or is it only the warriors who can name their pet?
Oh yes, you are correct, my misguided young chap. Only warriors can name their pets. However, the problem is not your class, it's that everyone, including members of the animal kingdom, hates you. Perhaps if you dealt with your body odor, smartened up and stopped that disturbing twitch you have in your right eye, you might get somewhere. Once you've mastered being in the company of animals without them running away in terror at the sight of your smelly face, then you can move on to other creatures, such as females, and by sheer balance of probabilities, at some point in your life you may get the chance to breed. At least, you would have, had the Murloc not poisoned your cheese sandwich. You have 6 hours to live. Ha ha!
Ask the
Murloc. Dear Murloc, I'm a mage and I want to know how to use spears. I've seen loads of mages with spears like Rod of the Ogre Magi. How do I get one too?
Ah, my dear, that is a simple question with a simple answer. Yes, they are using a well-known exploit known as OMFG Weapon Hacks LOLs, which allows them to use any weapon they wish, including this so-called rod. To enable it, you must go to your character select screen and delete your main character, so you can recreate it in Super Hacks mode. Push your down cursor key, your right cursor key, and then your down cursor key again in rapid succession, and then press the A button. That should enable Super Hacks mode and allow you to use spears. Now I must be off. My good friend Fiskard von Dingleberry is coming around tonight for a spot of tea, which is a perfect opportunity to beat him senseless with a shoehorn and steal his wallet. Till next time, fools! Ha ha!
Ask the Murloc.